डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Hello and welcome to the course Indian Poetics. This is Bhakti Vaishnav and I am going to talk to you about the topic historical perspective of Indian poetics. Let us start with the basic ideas and components of how and in what manner Indian poetics has or have developed over 2000 years in rich Indian cultural tradition. So let us begin. The objectives of this course or this component is to discuss the historical facts and perspectives of Indian poetics and to show the journey of evolution of this rich Indian tradition, how in different types of Indian poetics have evolved over a period of time into literary tradition in India. So, as we discussed earlier, that there are three types, or the Indian poetics in framework has been divided into three components. One is Sanskrit, second is Tamil, and third is modern or contemporary Indian poetics. In Sanskrit poetics, there have been various schools who have come up with various ideas. Basically, each school is defined by the central idea or the central concept which it propagates or founded as the basic characteristic or the foundation of poetry or the theory that it proposed, and each school is identified with the theory that it proposed. So we have different schools like Rasa school, that is aesthetics in literary theories or in Indian poetics. The another school that is founded in Indian literary tradition is Alamkar school, which basically deals with poetic figures or the word and meaning, the word and its syntax, or word and its semantics, and Alankara, how it is used in poetry and how poetry is constituted on the basis of words, and what kind of words and how words can make or create poetry in general. That is the theory proposed by Alamkar school. Then we have the school that deals with style, and it is called Riti school in Indian poetics. Then we have the school that gives more emphasis on the attributes, that is called as Guna school. Now remember, all these are not independent of each other. These schools are evolution of the basic theories, so they depend on each other. They take basic idea from one original school and then they elaborate on some component of that particular theory and evolve further. So the school of attribute was also further taken up and further elaborated upon in the next school, that was the school of suggestion, that is known as Dhani school, which we know that was proposed by Anandvardhana in his Dhvanyalok. Then we also have school which deals with obliquity of the language. The beauty of poetry or the heart of poetry is in the essence of how oblique it can be in terms of its use of words, how you can turn or change the meaning of a word or speech. That is the crux of Vakrokti school. That is the foundation of Vakrokti school. From that turn of speech we come from the artistic turn of speech we come to the school that depends on inference. What is the how it is inferred or how it allows one to infer is the basic of the school Anuman school in Sanskrit poetics. Then comes the next school that talks about propriety of the components of literature or a poetry, and it is known as Auchitya school. Sanskrit poetics is gives preference to the attainment of pleasure or ananda, and it is in a sense rasa. Rasa nishpati is the final goal of Sanskrit poetic tradition. How and in which way it is attained is the subject matter of various schools, as we had discussed already. In Agni Purana itself, there are discussions on alankaras like yamak, upma, rupak, and vibhavna and hetu. All these things are already first time mentioned in Agni Purana. So we can say that it is Agni Purana is the first text that already in a not a very concrete theory, but it definitely discusses the merits and demerits of poetic form. From there we come to the secret poets, there were discussions on what is the secret of poets, kavi rahasya, what is the rahasya that constitutes a poetry, what is the thing that a poet employs that creates a good poetry, what is the rahasya of poetic expression, is it poetic expression, is it style, is it alliteration, is it hyperbole, or the art of enjoyment itself. So this is the discussion point of many texts available in Indian poetics, and before the proper theoretical text on Indian poetics, Kavi Rahasya has been discussed already in the ancient times. It also flourished, the poetic tradition and Indian poetics flourished in the able hand of Kavi Kalidasa, and we see Raghuvansham and Kumar Sambhavam and Rutu Samhar and also Meghdutam, in which Kalidasa elaborates upon or practices the Indian poetics, the heart of Indian poetics. He tries to bring in various elements of poetry, writing or creating poetry in Sanskrit, in which he actually employs all the artistic elements that are required to constitute a poetry. From Kalidasa we come to the first text that is the foundation of Indian poetics, that is considered to be the foundational work of Indian poetics tradition, the Natya Shastra, which is created by Bharat Muni, and basically it is a text on grammar of classical dance and theatre. So the treatise Natya Shastra basically deals with Ras Nishpati. Bharat Muni highlights and emphasizes on the importance of rasa, the attainment of pleasure, how ras is evoked in the text or natya in is the chief goal of the or the soul of any poetry. For him it is natya, it is not kavya. We have to understand this difference. From Bharat Muni, who is believed to have created his work on Natya Shastra around 1st BC, we come directly to Bhamaha, who is believed to have written his work in 6th century. Now there is no clear-cut evidence or clear-cut text that we have in our hand in Sanskrit tradition which describes or discusses Indian poetics in detail during this many centuries from 1st to 6th. We don't have that kind of Sanskrit text. However, we can see that Prakrit was the language, or Prakrit was the bhasha that was flourishing during this era, and besides edicts, we can in Prashastis it is employed, and it was employed in poetry and prose also. So literature was created in Prakrit from 1st to 6th century, but in 6th century we have the first theoretician of Indian poetics in Sanskrit, who is Bhamaha, and whose work is very important. In terms of Indian poetic tradition in the ancient times, the works of Bhama, Dandin and Vamana are very important because they have contributed or constituted the foundation of the theories to come in future. Theories that we see over the period of time are based from their works. These theories of Sanskrit poetics can be classified on the basis of what aspects of literary composition is central to them. So, for example, Alankar and Vakrokti gives utmost importance to the language. The school of Guna and Dosh, Riti or Auchitya, they give more importance to style and composition. Verbal symbolism is of utmost importance for the of the theory of Dhvani, whereas the aesthetic experience is the sole object of analysis and preoccupation of rasa theory, whereas narrative inferred from Bhoja and Panitin's grammar is creates the theory of narrative theory in Indian poetics. Discourse and analysis or yukti is the theory that discusses composition and constitution of a text, whereas comprehensive analysis as constructed by Rajshekhara is also an important theory in terms of Indian theory. Now we have to remember one fact, that Rajshekhara's theory of Kavya Purusha is believed to be the first theory of Indian literary historiography, through which many scholars of Sanskrit have created literary historiography of Indian tradition. Kavya Purusha is considered to be the first indigenous methods of writing in literary historiography, as we already discussed. Now, these people can be divided into three groups. These scholars over 2000 years have been divided or compartmentalized in three categories. One is scholars, second is compilers, and third is commentators. On the basis of the way they have written their work, these scholars, thinkers and contributors of Indian literary traditions in terms of poetics, especially Sanskrit, they have been divided as scholars. So among the scholars over the centuries, we have Bharat, Bhama, Dandin, Vaman, Anandvardhan, Kuntak. All these are the originators of principles of elements. So they are called the stalwart scholars of Indian poetics. Whereas the compilers like Mammat, Vishwanath and Jagannath, they have compiled the theories that were available to them, and that is why they are called compilers. And then comes the third category of commentators, which consist Udbhat, Bhattanayak, Abhinav Gupta. All these people are prominent commentators in the tradition of Indian poetics. Books on poetics have been written in three forms. Again, now likewise the thinkers or the scholars who have contributed to Indian poetics, books have also been classified in terms of three forms. They are first category, that is written in terms of verse. They are purely written in terms of shlokas, verses. Next component or next way of writing books was in sutra. The sutra, as we know, they are very short, crisp sentences. It's like shlokas that give you more information. We know that sutras are known to Indian people, in Indian culture very well. So we know that in a small sentence they will give you very deep ideas, deep meanings. So they are loaded. And third category is karika. Karikas are basically crisp couplets through which these authors, these thinkers have given their theories over period of time. Next comes the elements of poetics or kavya. This is very important. In terms of poetics or kavya, we need to understand what are the various elements that constitute the poetics of Indian tradition in Sanskrit. So first is kavya swarupa, which is which means nature of poetry. what causes poetry, definition of poetry, various classes of poetry, and purposes of poetry. Then Shabda Shakti, the significance of word and their power. That is also a major element of poetics in Indian tradition in Sanskrit. Then Dhvani Kavya, the poetry that has suggestive power is the supreme. That is also a very important element of Indian poetics. Then Guni Bhuta, Vangmaya Kavya, the poetry where suggested, that is Dhvani, is secondary to the primary sense. That is also a very important element of Indian poetics. Emotive content or rasa, rasa nishpati, rasa iti rasa, all this is a very foundational element of Indian poetics in Sanskrit. Then we have Riti, which is also about style or poetry, style of poetry or diction in poetry, style of writing poetry or style of diction in a particular poetry. We have Alamkara, which discusses figurative beauty and poetic expressions. Then we have Dosha, which talks about the blemishes in poetic expressions that need to be avoided. Now remember, these theories are giving do's also and they are giving don'ts also in terms of doshas. They list out the doshas that can harm a poetry or that can stop a poetry from becoming a poetry. Then comes the last and important element of Natya Vidhana, the dramatic effect of dramaturgy. Remember, Indian poetics is, or Indian literature is a constitution, it constitutes drama and poetry as major forms of literature in earlier times. So we have prose and poetry both. So when we talk about poetics or kavya, the same rules or the same elements are applicable to prose as well, and in prose drama as well. So dramaturgy or the effect of drama is also very important element of poetics in India in terms of Sanskrit tradition. Now let us do a journey through the history of Indian poetics. Now we know that the preoccupations of Indian poetics in Sanskrit is Kavya Karan, Kavya Prayojan and Kavya Lakshan. All these thinkers over these centuries, they have engaged themselves with the question of what is the origin of poetry, what is the use of poetry, and what are the characteristics of a poem. As we already discussed, they have listed the elements, but which theory discusses what, we need to remember, and they form the crux of the whole rich tradition of Indian poetics in Sanskrit literature or Sanskrit itself. So, when talking about Kavya Prayojan, Bhama opines that composition of good poetry leads one to proficiency in virtue, that means dharma, riches, that is artha, objects, that is kama, and salvation, that is moksha, as also in fine arts, and it also brings in fame and pleasure, that is kirti and priti. So here Bhama gives an idea of Kavya Prayojan, the purpose of poetry. It is not just to get pleasure, material pleasure or sensual pleasure. Actually, the pleasure that or the purpose of a poetry is to bring in the four major elements, that is the four purusharthas in Indian cultural system has to be attained through kavya or through the activity or through the engagement with kavya. So when a person engages or occupies himself or herself in kavya, it should lead to the to dharma, that is proficiency in virtue. It should also lead to earth, that is richness. It should give richness. It should also lead to object of desires, that is kama. It also should ultimately lead there should be a spiritual upliftment also, and that is how it gets connected to moksha as well. So it, while engaging oneself in kala, It also leads to 4 purusharthas, and it also bring in kirti and priti. There is a kind of fame and pleasure when one gets engaged or involved or occupied in writing poetry or at the receiver's end of poetry. So this is very important in terms of Kavya Prayojana. Dandin Kavya Darsha. So let us discuss what these various thinkers have said in their own ways about the theory or Indian poetics over a period of time. In Ritivadi school, Dandin has given first definition of Kavya. Not only definition, he has also given division of Kavya. So Dandin's importance in history of Indian poetics in Sanskrit is that he is the first person who actually gives definition of Kavya. His first section deals with the definition and divisions of Kavya, and the second section deals with description of alamkaras, enumeration of alankara, and description of 35 alankaras. He gives 35 types of alankara in this book that he has written. If you can call it a book, it is a treatise named as Kavya Darsha. It is very important in terms of historical importance because through him we come to know about a systematic framework of division and definition of Kavya. From there we move on to Vamana. Vamana has given major contribution in terms of his contribution towards giving the outline of scheme of poetics. He has given us a well thought and carefully drafted outline scheme of poetics for Indian poetics. He has been regarded as representative of the Riti system. He follows Dandin, and he is regarded as foremost representative of the Riti system. Bhama's Kavyalankar is foundational text that dealt with poetics as a separate entity from the dramatic theory. Now this is very important because now in Bhama we come to a very different kind of categorization between dramatic theory and poetics in terms of poetry. So he gives a separate identity to poetics from which is independent of dramatic theory. Remember, from Bharat Muni till other theorists, we have been dealing with drama as a major point of reference for theorization on Indian poetics. His impressive theorization deals with Kavya Sharira, the form of poetry, which means figures of speech, dosha, that is poetic blemishes, Nyaya, which is epistemology, and Shabda Shuddhi. Accuracy in grammar is also very important because these 4 aspects together constitute Kavya Sharira. So, figure of speech, dosha, Nyaya, and Shabda Shuddhi are key elements that are proposed by Bhama in Kavyalankar. Vakrokti is the most essential element of poetry, and it was proposed by Kuntak in his Vakrokti Jivitam. Before that, we need to discuss Anandvardhana, who has given us the theory of Dhvani. Dhvanyalok is the foundational text that emphasizes on the importance of aesthetic expressions, aesthetic suggestion. Dhvani means aesthetic suggestion. According to Dhvani school, the suggestions given by poetry or the words are more or are the thing that actually renders poetic quality to a poetry or a drama. So literature, the chief source of poetry was suggestion, aesthetic suggestion, according to Anandvardhana. The theory of Dhvani finds its origin in the analysis of language and meanings word expresses the word meaning of words are very important in terms of Abhinav Gupta in his Lochana, which is a kind of extension of Anandvardhan's Dhwani work, Dhwani school. He gives further elaboration on the school of Dhwani as proposed by Anandvardhan. Dhananjay in his Das Rupakam talks about dramaturgy, theory of rasa, and 10 kinds of rupakas. Dhananjay is also a very important figure in history of Indian poetics and Sanskrit, because he discussed dramaturgy and gave the first time he gave the first 10 rupakas or the types of rupakas in his Das Rupaka. As we already discussed in Vakrokti Jivita, Kuntak presented a fresh view on poetic creation and beauty. Artistic turn of speech brings in poetic creation and brings in poetic beauty according to Kuntak. From there we move to Tamil poetics, which is equally rich and ancient tradition in terms of Indian poetics. Tolakapiyam is the earliest identified treatise on grammar in the history of Tamil poetics. It belongs to the Sangam tradition, which is often spelled as Cankam. Sangam is a kind of assembly of poets over a period of time, and Sangam period is quite long in terms of its span. So we will be taking up it one by one. Basically, there are two categories in terms of Sangam poetry. One is Akayatam and another is Tolakapiyam. And Tolakapiyam, as we already discussed, is a very important work in terms of Tamil poetics on poetry and in general linguistic studies. There are three mythological times that are charted out for the Sangam assembly or Sangam period. First phase owes its origin to Agthiryar. It is also known as Agastya Muni, who came from north and settled in Madurai. The span of this first phase is considered to be 4,400 years. Second phase begins with Agastya establishing the second Sangam, and it consists of 3,700 poets, and also it is believed to have lasted for almost 3,700 years. Third and last phase of Sangam period is the early centuries of Christian era, which lasted for almost 1850 years, and it is believed to have resided on the river of Vangai. The Tamil poetics basically discusses morphology, phonology, orthography, semantics, and the composition of poetry. Earliest treatise to point out the usage of two types of Tamil. In Tolakapiyam we come to know that there were two types of Tamil that was being used in the contemporary times. One is Sentamil, and second that which is classical Tamil, and another is Kodun Tamil, which is Tamil dialects popular during that point of time. So you see that there is a descriptive analysis and descriptive linguistics that can be seen or read or inferred from the collection of Sangam poetry in Tolakapiyam. It also highlights the earliest forms of religious beliefs, and amongst the which was present in contemporary people. Religious beliefs are specially found in the ninth anthology of Tolakapiyam, which describes the life of contemporary people of their own period. So you can infer that social cultural belief system in the ninth anthology, and first 8 anthologies details or discusses and analyzes the various aspects of poetics in terms of meaning, syntax, diction, and beauty of poetry. it has also interesting aspect of recurring references to religious figures like Murugan, uh, th- who appears as a central deity, and there are references to various places and other deities also in Tolakapiyam. In Sangam poetry, we see clear-cut references with geographical locations like Madurai and various rivers, and this is how Tolakapiyam also becomes a kind of text that theorizes Tamil poetics in a larger background of its geographical, cultural background. So you can get major ideas about Tamil contemporary life from this text as well. From Tamil poetics, we come to Indian poetics in other languages as well. Let's have a journey through history, facts, and perspectives of Indian poetics in other languages as well, because Indian bhashas are equally important. Over a period of time, India has contributed in various manners and in various languages and has enriched its tradition of poetics. So we can see the contribution of Abul Fazl in Akbarnama. Uh, this is the texts of Abul Fazl basically talk about the or actually become the text by Abul Fazl show the rich cultural combination or convergence of Urdu in Indian tradition. So we have Abdul Badayuni also, who has written Tawarik, and it changed the dimension of literary historiography of that particular time. Al Badayuni's Tawarik is a very important work of literary historiography, and in special in terms of language and also in terms of its approach. G.N. Devi has given a systematic analysis which can be read to have a better understanding of this phenomenal work. The Indian poetics found the freedom of expression in works of another Urdu writer, Mirza Ghalib, who not only wrote ghazals. His ghazals are of course pertaining to romanticism, but are also pious and religious in nature, and his letters are equally religious and pious. Through his practice, Mirza Ghalib has also contributed in terms of experimentation and innovation in terms of ghazals and prose writing in Indian poetics. Along with Urdu, we have also a kind of evolution and convergence of poetics in Indian tradition through Persian and Arabic languages. Al-Badayuni, as we have already discussed, is one of the earliest historiographers of India, who is also known for his work Tawarik, as we discussed. Along with Al-Badayuni, the work of Amir Khusro is very important. He has contributed in terms of music, poetry, and chronicle writing. His theories on poetics can be found in Nu Sifir. The work he has written is Nu Sifir. He wrote in Persian and Hindi and accommodated Arabic words in his poetry. So now we see this amalgamation of various languages in poetry in Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro is a very popular name even in the contemporary times because of his amalgamation or choice of using words from Hindi, Persian, and Arabic. It has still retained in popular culture also. He combined his understanding of theories of philosophies in his poetical expressions. Khusro is very important because he had combined his theories of philosophy in his poetical expressions, which are available to us in various poetries in modern times. From then onwards, we come to medieval times, and during medieval times, there is a very important evolution in terms of Indian theories or Indian poetics. along with the Navrasa that was proposed by the theory that was proposed by Bharat Muni, we have one more ras added to the theory or the tradition of Indian poetics, and that is Bhakti Rasa, that was introduced by Bhakti movement during medieval times in India. Now, this is the details of this Bhakti Ras or Bhakti movement can be understood by Srila Rup Swami's work, and he gives a broad understanding, deep understanding of how Bhakti Rasa has evolved over a period of time and how it is a major ras for the poetry that is written during medieval times. We know that Narsi Mehta, Mirabai, all these people are the major contributors of Bhakti poetry, Bhakti movement, and Bhakti Rasa is emergence of modern Indian bhashas. It is very interesting that through medieval times it becomes the joining or bridging phase. The poetry of Bhakti movement becomes the bridging element of the language or the bhashas of ancient time and connecting it with the bhashas that we speak in our own times. From there onwards, we move towards contributors like Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, who has contributed in development of Bengali poetics and literature. His contribution to literature is very noteworthy. His poetic ideas are filled with the spirit of nationalism. We all know Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's works are founded in the spirit of nationalism, and we also have his major contribution as Vande Mataram, which is a play of Indian bhashas in which he brings in other words from other languages along with the major main language of the poem. So Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay is a figure that brings in a new direction for Bengali poetics, and he is elaborated on the concept of beauty in many of his earlier works. Then comes Rabindranath Tagore, who in his Aesthetics of Modernism talks about the new poetics, the modernism. He actually contributed a lot in terms of evolving the concepts of aestheticism, what it means, what aestheticism means in Indian reference or Indian poetics or Indian cultural tradition. He also brought in the elements of modernism from West to Indian poetics in Bengali as well as in English writing. He gave this yardsticks of Satya, Sheel and Sundaram in terms of Indian poetics, which are very important elements of studying literature of according to him. He illuminated the concepts of aesthetics, art and beauty in most of his literary works, theories on poetry itself, and in his also in paintings and in his music, which is known as Rabindra Sangeet. Gurudev's name will forever be taken in the entire world with utmost respect, and for his great contribution of our national anthem, which is Jana Gana Man and Amar Sonar Bangla. These are the creations that we will remember forever. Of course, his work Gitanjali is a work in itself in terms of introducing like combining mysticism along with many other aspects of poetics in one, and he has contributed immensely in terms of enriching modern contemporary poetics in India. From there we have writers or creators or critics like Suresh Joshi. Suresh Joshi has specially evolved as a major critic of Gujarati literature over a period of time. He had a deep understanding of Indian Eastern and Western philosophy, and he has shown this deep understanding of both the philosophies in his works, and he has created a kind of, or ushered a new era in Gujarati literature. He's believed to be the person who brought in the era of modernism and also the era of postmodernism in Gujarati literary tradition. So his contribution to Indian poetics in terms of Indian bhashas is of immense importance. Remarkable quality about Suresh Joshi is that he defied classicism. So he is one of the persons who has come out of the straitjacket frameworks of classifications, and that is why he became more noteworthy over a period of time, and he is one of the major contributors not only for Gujarati literary tradition but as a contributor to the Indian poetics in terms of Indian bhashas. We also have writers like Bhalachandra Nimade, who in 80s came up with this entire theory of Deshwad or nativism through his work, and who is followed by writers like G.N. Devi in his After Amnesia, and current contemporary writers like Makarand Paranjape discusses in detail Deshwad, and this Deshwad is actually the theory of nativism that is established after independence. It is kind of setting Indian poetics or setting the direction of Indian poetics in a with a post-colonial perspective. So it is very important. We also have authors like M. Hiriyanna who in his art experience discusses about various poetry and art experiences in terms of Indian cultural traditions. We also have Indian critics and authors like C.D. Narasimhaiah, K.R. Srinivas Iyengar and M.K. Nayak, who have chiefly contributed towards this larger framework called Indian poetics in terms of our cultural and literary tradition and our rich heritage. Thank you students and thank you learners for paying attention to this component in which we discuss the various historical perspectives as part of our course Indian Poetics. Thank you.